All right, start.
Welcome everyone to Hackschool session 5. Today we'll be taking a big jump from advanced CSS from last week, and we'll be diving into asynchronous JavaScript and web APIs. So just a few logistics. These are the links to the slides and the README. Today we're gonna cover a lot. So a lot of the information is going to be on the README, and we may not have time to cover everything on the README. So if you're ever looking for a refresher or want to learn more, you can always refer back to the README. This is the attendance code, membership portal, async. Probably not a very good joke, but there you go. And please fill in the feedback form if you have time. You will be entered into a raffle, just like always. Now we're going to have an announcement about the BruinQuest social. I'll let Tim talk now.
Yeah, just really quick. So one of the other hack events that's going on is called BruinQuest, and we have a little social coming up. So this is the week before the actual event. It's a very casual game night. So it's the time's on the screen, but it's November 14th from 7 to 9 Pacific time. I realized that for those who don't have the slides, I can copy the links into the chat. But yeah, if you're interested, come on out. It's very casual. It's just a time to maybe meet people. If you're interested in doing BruinQuest, to meet people to form teams, or just honestly just to hang out and decompress. So I'd appreciate it if for any of those who could make it out. That is all. I'll give it back to you, Alex. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. So if you're confused at any point, please ask questions. We're going to be covering a lot of material today, and sorry you had to start on such a bad footing, but the stuff we're going to cover is going to be pretty confusing for many. At least the first time that I learned this, I didn't really understand it as well. So it's completely fine if you're still confused afterwards, or you may still have questions. Just please ask questions if you have any. Now, the roadmap for today. What is asynchronous JavaScript, first of all? Because right now we've all been coding in what we call synchronous programming. So we're going to be introducing async through callbacks, and then maybe we'll talk about one problem with callbacks. And then we're going to talk about what are promises. Promises are a very important part of asynchronous JavaScript. And so we're going to jump from promises into web APIs, which is an application. You would say it's an application of asynchronous programming, and we're going to introduce the fetch function. And then there's going to be a demo at the end. So yeah. So first of all, what is async? So normally our programs run synchronously, and this means that every task is executed one after the other. So there's no cutting and nothing. So yeah. And asynchronous programming means that we can do certain tasks while we wait for others to complete. So take this diagram as an example. So as you see on the left, synchronous programming, task 2 has to run after task 1, and task 3 has to run after task 2. But then for asynchronous on the right, task 1, 2, 3, 4 could potentially run all at the same time. Now this is pretty abstract, so let's use an analogy. Okay, let's say that it's 9 p.m. You need to do your washing, and you need to do a CS assignment that's due the next morning. And so this means that you need to do 3 things. You need to wash your clothes, you need to dry your clothes, and then you need to do your homework. So the stupid approach, if you are a bad programmer, you would be putting your clothes in the washing machine. You wait for your clothes to finish, and then you take your clothes, and then you take clothes out of the washing machine and put it into the drying machine. And then you wait again. And then after your clothes is dried, you can start doing your homework, or you can start partying because you don't care. And regardless of whether or not you do your homework or you start partying, you'd still cry in the end. So yeah, that's the stupid approach. But let's say like we want to do it in a smart method, right? How we go about doing this. So first of all, we want to put your clothes in the washing machine, and then you can start doing a bit of your homework. And after your clothes have washed, you can stop doing your homework and put your clothes in the dryer, and then you can resume doing homework. And then after your clothes have dried, stop doing homework again, taking them out of the dryer, fold them, do whatever you need to do with them, and then you can continue doing your homework late into the night. Yeah, no matter what, you'll be doing your homework late into the night because it's CS. Anyways, yeah, so this is what we mean, sort of. You can see that we're doing tasks while we wait. So in this example, some of these tasks require us to wait. So putting our clothes in a washing machine requires us to wait. But then starting homework can be done like anytime. So then what tasks in web dev that that requires us to wait? And there are actually plenty of things, right? So for example, requesting data from websites. We'll be doing this today. Downloading and uploading files, etc. And these things all take time to complete. And so like the crux of it is that we would like our code to be able to do other things while we wait for these tasks. So we save time and finish our homework earlier. So let's use Facebook as an example, right? So when you're uploading a meme to your favorite meme page on Facebook, you press the upload button, and the Facebook doesn't freeze, just doesn't freeze and start uploading like my Zoom froze today. It's able to do other things. And so this is an example of asynchronous JavaScript, because while you're uploading a meme, you can do other stuff with it, and so that the Facebook doesn't need to wait. And well, still sounds kind of complicated, right? Don't worry, we'll be using cooking as an analogy to dive into this. Yeah, not this type of cooking though. If you play Genshin Impact, you'll know what this means. But okay, let's make vegetable ramen. So let's split making vegetable ramen into 4 steps. Okay, we first boil the water. Let's say this takes 3 seconds, and then we can add the ramen. This is instant. It doesn't take any time to add ramen. And then we can wash vegetables, which takes 2 seconds, and then we can add the vegetables. So this is instant as well. What stove do you have and where can I get it? Yeah, anyways. So we can then split these 4 steps into 4 functions. Okay, so we have a boil water function that takes 3 seconds. We have an add ramen function, and then we have a wash veggies function, and then we have an add veggies function. Yeah, we're using seconds just to save time. We don't want to actually wait for 3 minutes, otherwise our workshop would take forever. So, and then after that, we'll have our beautiful ramen, which will hopefully look something like this. Okay, so let's try to actually define our functions, right? So our first step is boiling the water. So, we can first define a function called boil water, and then we can console.log something. It's called start boiling, right? We'll tell ourselves, okay, we'll start boiling now. And then we will create a variable called start and save it as the current time. Now, what date.now does is you can think of it as it gets the current time. And you don't need to know anything more than that. I believe that we've used date.now before in our 2 weeks ago in our DOM API workshop. But if you don't remember or you were not at our workshop, it is okay. You just need to know that start now contains the current time. And then afterwards, we're going to constantly check if 3 seconds or 3,000 milliseconds have passed since our start time. And then afterwards, we can console.log to say the water is boiled. So, this can be pretty confusing. So, so there's a summary of what the code does here, but actually, you don't if you still don't understand this is okay. All you need to know that this is just a very JavaScripty way of saying stop running for 3 seconds and then resume running here at console.log. Yeah. So is there any questions about this? I know this is maybe pretty confusing. So the braces after the loop. So you can think of usually when we do a while loop, we like actually write something and we do something. So like while something, something, do this, this, and we put whatever we want to do inside the braces. And since we don't want to do anything, we just want the computer to wait, or we want JavaScript to just wait there. This is just signifying that do nothing. Yeah. I'm sure it could be answered better, but I hope that answers your question. Okay, so let's move on. We can do the same thing for washing our vegetables. Oh, can we insert wash vegetables here? Yes, we can, but remember that we have a different function for washing our vegetables instead. So, but then we are doing a very similar implementation for our wash vegetables function. So let's say we are washing the vegetables, and then again, we need to do something very similar. We'll tell ourselves, okay, we've started washing now, and then we create a date object of the current time, and then keep checking whether or not 2 seconds have passed, or 2000 milliseconds. And then we're going to tell ourselves, yes, veggies washed. So this is very similar to boil water and our boil water function. And as you can see, instead of 3000 seconds, it's 2000 seconds to signify, yeah, we're only washing for 2 seconds. We're only waiting. We're only stopping our code for 2 seconds instead of 3. Yeah, and some people asked before, why are we eating veggies? Well, because we need to be healthy. Anyways, so we're adding ramen. So let's define our functions for adding the ramen and vegetables, right? This is very simple because they're instant. It doesn't actually take any time. We just need to tell ourselves, okay, we're putting our vegetables in a pan now. And okay, we're putting our ramen in the water. Okay, so let's try it out. I'm gonna go over to VS Code. Let's hope my computer doesn't crash. Haha. Okay, so does everyone see my screen? Does it look okay? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So this is on the right here on VS Code. We have. Oh no! Don't look at my tabs. We on the right here. We have the functions that we just called, that we just defined, right? So we have first of all our boil water function, our wash veggies function, our add veggies function, our add ramen function. And what this JavaScript page does, it just calls boil water, it calls wash vegetables, it calls add the vegetables, and it calls add ramen, right? Seems pretty simple. Well, let's give it a run. Now there are many ways to run this JavaScript page, but to make this the most simple, I will just create an empty HTML page called console. And as you can see, this HTML page is empty, except that it has a script tag. Now, so what this means is that whenever we refresh this page, it will run this JavaScript page, and whatever is printed will be printed in the console. So let's give this a try. Yeah, so I'm going to open console is here. And so I'm going to uncomment this. And then if we look at the console, here we see that nothing has happened. And then if I uncomment our slowcook.js, just a reminder again, slowcook.js is actually this page, is our page that we just defined. We're cooking this slowly. And then I'm going to refresh the page. Let's see what happens. So we start boiling. Our water is boiled. Start washing. Our veggies have washed. And then veggies in the pan, ramen in the water. So how much time did this take? How much time did this take? If anyone was counting. 5. I see a 5. Yes, 5 seconds. That is great. So did it really have to take 5 seconds though? So are you gonna really have to, like normally when you're cooking, right? Are you going to start boiling your water, look at your water boil, and then you start washing your veggies, and then after your veggies have washed, you then put everything in? No, right? Gordon could do it in minus 1 second. No, we don't need to stare at our water boiling, and we want to be as efficient as possible when we're cooking. So what we want to do is we want to start boiling the water, and while the water is boiling, we start washing the veggies. And this can be achieved using callback functions. But what are callback functions? So before that, let's jump back. Let's jump back to workshop 3. So remember in workshop 3, we used a function called setInterval. And what this setInterval function did is that every 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds, yeah, get used to dealing with milliseconds, guys. So every 1 second, it would call the function that we defined tick here. And then remember that every 1 second, we would call our function tick, and it would tick the clock in our page, right? So what we didn't actually tell you is that, tick is actually a callback function. But what is a callback function? Again, what is a callback function? So a callback function is a function passed into another function as an argument. And then this is then invoked inside the outer function, right? Sounds pretty complicated. Let's see an example again. So I'm back on this page. I have a JavaScript file called callback.js. Let's go on to this callback.js. I'm going to get rid of this. And sorry, give me a second. Yes, so callback.js. So we want to define a function called const say hello, right? And what it does is it takes a function name as its argument, and then we want to just console.log get hello and name. Very simple. Then we're going to want to define another function, say greet user. And this greet user function takes in a callback. Is a function, and it takes in a callback as its argument. And so first, it's going to get the user. So it's going to get a variable. It's going to call user equals to, and then some username. So user Baker. And then it's going to call callback user. So as you can see, callback. So callback is our callback function. Okay, so even though it looks like any normal variable, it can actually be used as a function. Okay, so we can just put brackets around it, and we can just use it as any normal function. That's a callback function. We're using a function inside of a function. And then, so in our normal page, we can go here and just say, greet user, say hello. And there. So let's try run this code. If I'm not mistaken, it should run. I'm going this off the back of my head. So yeah. So if I'm mistaken, this should say hello. And let's give it a run. Okay. So let's go back to our console.html. We see here that we have a script tag called callback.js. I'm going to uncomment this and comment slowcook.js again. So here we have callback.js. And so we would expect that if we reload this HTML page, it will start running whatever is in this page on the right. So yeah, let's give it a try. Refresh, hello, Faker, right? Exactly the behavior that we want. Right, I'm gonna stop for any questions. What we did was introduce a callback function. Any questions? Nope, okay. Let's go back. right? So we introduced a callback function. We now know what a callback function is. Now, can you go over the order of execution with those functions one more time? But not the, okay. So back to slowcook.js, why are boil water and wash vegetables arrow functions, but not the other two functions? So I just defined these two functions on the fly, but I believe they should be arrow functions. They have the arrow, unless I'm missing something. So if you go back to slowcook.js, the format of this looks exactly the same, except that see here that I have because I'm using a variable, we're putting our parameters in the parentheses here, but yeah, these should be the same. And then, oh yes, I guess I forgot to change this. So thank you for reminding me. This was actually a mistake on my part. So I accidentally made my functions half arrow functions and half not. But then in this context, they do the exact same thing. But thank you for the reminder. I completely forgot about this. Thank you. So I can change them right now to show you that it is exactly the same. Thanks for the reminder. So yes, thank you, Eugene. So I was about to go over that as well. So let's say we call greet user here. I wish I had a pointer here, but so at line 10, our code starts running. We call greet user with parameters say hello. So now our code goes to greet user, right? It says that, okay, let's start running greet user. So it creates a variable called user and stores it as faker. And then we called whatever callback function this is. And then we see that, okay, callback, say hello was actually passed. So now we'll replace this callback thingy with say hello. So this is exactly the same thing as, saying say hello user. And we'll do the exact same thing. Josh asks, what if we don't know the number of parameters for the callback function? Yeah, so this callback thing requires you to know the number of parameters. And if you don't know, then either your code will go like, oh, will probably shout at you when you run. So yeah. Yes, but you never know. Well, in most cases, you'll have to, so if you get the wrong number of parameters, if you're lucky, the code will just ignore it and as if nothing happened, it'll keep running if you don't use those parameters. But when you use them, then JavaScript will probably shout at you. At least that's from my understanding. Is there any advantage in using callback instead of the other function? Yes, there is, and we'll see what it is later. So callback is just an arbitrary name for the function that you're passing, right? Yeah, it's just an arbitrary name. I could just go like, and we at the end here, we just go like, and it'll be the exact same thing. Yes. Okay, so yeah. So now let's go back. Okay, we're gonna introduce a function called set. Oh, how do you do the nothing and type the same? Oh, it's just ASDF. I don't know. Okay, I'm bad at jokes. Okay, anyways, we're gonna introduce a set timeout function. Okay, let's get back into this. So we're gonna introduce a function called set timeout function. Now, set timeout function is very similar to our set interval function. Okay, it takes a callback function as its first argument, and then it takes the number of milliseconds as its second argument. And so what it does, it is a function. It is an example of a function that is a callback function as an argument. So what it does is after number of milliseconds, it will call the function specified in the first argument. So if we go back to set interval calls this function specified in the first argument every 1,000 seconds. But if this was replaced with set timeout, it would call tick only once after 1 second. Okay, so let's see an example of this, right? Let's try using callbacks in our boil water function, for example. So we can first define a function called print boiled. And what this does is it console.logs water boil. Same, so this is pretty standard, not pretty standard, but yeah, this is what it does. And then we need to make changes to our boil water function now. So the first part of the boil water function is the same. We just tell ourselves, yes, let's start boiling the water. And then we can set a timeout. And this timeout, second parameter, is still 3,000 milliseconds, sorry. And it we print boiled. So we call print boiled after 3,000 milliseconds. And what it does is that, it calls print boiled and then it prints water boiled. So very similar to the same. Can you have multiple callback functions in one? Yes, and we'll see that that is actually that can actually be a problem. So I believe so, yeah. And so we'll see here that this at first glance doesn't seem to be much different than what we did before. All this did is that it stalled for 3 seconds and then it console.logs water boiled. What this does is actually it allows, so after we call set timeout, our code can go off and do other things instead of just waiting there. So we set a timer, it's called set timeout, and it reminds us to come back and we are free to do other things. And after 3,000 milliseconds has passed, we execute this print boiled function. And so this is our callback function. Print boiled is now our callback function. So, and also note that this code on the left is same as this code on the right. Now, what's so different about it is that we just defined our print boiled function inside the argument here. And this is allowed. So this takes up less space. So we'll be using this sort of notation and this sort of format for the rest of our workshops. So let's try to do it in our code. Let's try it out. Hold up, I'm going to I don't know if you guys see this, but I'm going to drop my review over here. Thank you. Okay, this is a lot better. So let's go back to our slowcook.js. I'm going to copy and paste everything that we had before, and then I'm going to paste it here, right? So this is what we had before. This was how we cooked our ramen before. Well, let's try and make our changes now. So remember what we did, all right? Let's get rid of these 3 lines because we don't need them anymore. So our first line was still the same, but afterwards we called a function set timeout. So let's call set timeout, right? And set timeout, remember, it takes 2 arguments. The second argument was the number of times. So we can do this right now. We can just say, okay, after 3,000 seconds, 3,000 milliseconds, sorry, I should say 3 seconds. 3 seconds, call the function on this left-hand side. And so let's find what this function is, what we want to do. So we're going to define an arrow on an arrow function right now, and then what this function does is very simple. It console.log water boil. And yeah, so there we go. Very, very simple. And let's try again for wash veggies. Let's do the same thing. So we set timeout again, 2 arguments again, but this time for 2 seconds. And then for our first argument is whatever we want to do after 2 seconds have passed. And that's very simple, very similar to water boiled. We define a function and then we just console.log veggies washed. I just noticed that, I've been using double quotes here and single quotes here. That is inconsistent. I'm sorry. I'm going to change them now. Right. So, this seems very good now. So let's give this a run, right? Here, this page is saved in a page called callback.js. So we're gonna put this. I have a script tag here called callback hook. So let's go ahead and reload this and see what it does. Right. Right. So notice that it started boiling and started washing at the same time. Right. I'm gonna do it again. You might have missed it. So we start boiling and start washing at the same time, and then veggies have washed, veggies and boiled, ended at the same time. Right. So let's go back to our slide. So let's see what happened. Right. So we did the same thing for our veggies. Right. This should look pretty familiar. And then we called our function like this. Right. So and this was our output. As you see, this is mirrors the output. Yeah. So does anyone notice a problem with this? So we started boiling, and then we started washing, and then we put our ramen in the water, and then our veggies in the pan, and then our veggies have finished wash, and then our water is boiled. Does anyone see a big problem with this logically? Okay. Yes. Right. We're adding ramen before the water is boiled, and like this is completely wrong, right? We haven't even finished washing our vegetables, and we've already added the vegetables in the pan. Like what? Oh no, right? There's a cooking catastrophe. So, well, this is still fixable, right? If we can, let's go back, right? Let's go back to our callback.cook. This is still fixable. So what do we need to do here, right? We want add vegetables to be called only after the vegetables are finished washed. And we have a function for that. It's this function. So we can call add veggies here. And then this way, add veggies will only be called 2 seconds after our veggies have started washing, which is precisely when we have finished washing our vegetables. This is perfect. Column. Okay, anyways, similar for boil water, we only want to call boil water after our water is boiled, and that is precisely 3 seconds after we have started boiling the water. So right now, we only need to call boil water and wash veggies, and automatically it should do the behavior that we want, right? So let's go back to our console.html on the left, and let's refresh and see what happens. Start boiling, start washing. Veggies washed, veggies in the pan. Water boiled. Wait, what happened? Oh, yes, I know what happened. I'm sorry. It called it again. It seems to keep calling itself, but let's ignore that for now. So, oh yes, I know what happened. Yes, I put boil water instead of add ramen. Thank you for the reminder, James. Completely my fault. Okay, so this should happen correctly now. We started boiling, we started washing, veggies have washed, veggies in the pan, water boiled, and then ramen in the water, right? So this is the behavior that we want, right? And yeah, so we've successfully made our ramen, yeah? So as we can see, it's still solvable. What we did was we added our ramen function inside boil water, inside our timeout callback function, and we added add veggies, our add veggies function inside of the callback function, right? And we're done. Yeah, we are now ramen chefs. Call yourselves proud. Wait, I think that's how you use that term. Anyways. Right, well done. You have made Naruto happy. Except, right? So our code is, well, starting to get slightly complicated. Well, actually, our code is still relatively simple. But what we can do is that our code can get even more complex than this. And earlier in the chat, someone mentioned, can we use multiple callbacks can we call multiple callbacks inside of a callback? And yes. So what we can do actually is we can layer callbacks on top of each other. So we'll call a callback function inside of a callback function, inside of another callback function. And this makes our code very, very complicated, right? We won't go into this too much now, but this is called callback hell. And well, we won't, yeah, as I mentioned before, we won't be going too much into callback hell, but if you want to learn more, there is a little example in the README, and there's more to learn about in these websites if you're interested. Okay. And here we'll take a break. So it is 6:46, so let's take a 10-minute break because actually, let's take a 10-minute break because there's some polls that you can do. So let's resume at.
Do you want me to launch the poll first before we take our break?
Yeah.
Okay, let's launch the poll and then we'll go over answers and take a break.
Oh wait, I think no, 57. Like my brain's not working correctly. Sorry, it's still early in the morning. Clutch time conversion. So clutch. Okay, I would like to play lo-fi now, but I don't have the tools to do so. I'm sorry. Come back in 10 seconds, not 10 minutes, right? Yes, if you want to.
Wait, so
only true ramen chefs come back in 10 seconds.
Would I be the one playing lo-fi in this case?
Yes.
Okay.
If you want to, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I can. I shared the Discord screen only.
Okay, that's all good. Oh, yeah.
Yes, Eugene, you could just sing for us. That is like a
Yeah,
replacement.
Eugene, let's sing for us. Did I mention that
would.
Eugene has a YouTube channel?
Oh my god.
I'm gonna end the.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm gonna end the poll so we. Yeah.
F. So I don't actually know what the general consensus of the answer is, but I believe the answer for the first one was answer 12, 12, if I'm not wrong. And I guess it's very pretty hard to go through it because I don't actually have the code. I might have the code somewhere. But no, I don't. Actually, I do. Do I? I think I do. Yes. Bear with me. You're going to go through some very secret files. It isn't a README. I just remembered. So poll question. We're going to open with. Is there VS Code here? Yes. Perfect. So, where is it? Okay. So yeah. So here is. I think the first question was to just console log x, if I believe. And so what it does is. Yeah. That's okay, Jacob. I guess it's Jacob, right? So anyways, so we have adder. We first call our adder function. Let's just get rid of this. So the first question was just this, if I'm correct from memory. So we first call our adder function with display as a callback and 7 and 5, right? So we go to our adder function. We see that, okay, so first adder, it takes in a callback x and y. And first of all, we create a variable called sum that just sums x and y together. So right now, since this x is 5 and y is x is 7, y is 5, sum should be 12. And then we will call callback sum, right? And remember that we can just replace this callback word with display answer. So we'll be calling display answer. So what it does is it goes to display answer. Remember that display answer takes one argument, it's sum, and then what it does is console.log answer plus sum. And now because sum is 12, it will just print answer 12, and then it will return sum. It returns sum, so sum is 12, so 12 goes all the way back to adder, and adder returns whatever is returned from display answer. So adder will actually return sum, it returns 12. So since it returns 12, it goes all the way back, and we see that we store this number 12 into our variable x here. And then we console.log x. So it should just be answer 12, 12. Okay, so I believe that the second part of the question now is this variable x. So we do the same thing. And now we know that x, I'm okay to just skip everything and just go back. X is now 12 because we already went through that. And now we call subtractor. So display answer x and 9. So now that x is 12, we can just, doing this is the same thing, right? So we do x, and then we go, so we go to subtractor. Subtractor is very similar to adder. It's a callback. It takes a callback function as a parameter. It has an x in here and a y in here. So I don't know why this is called, oh yeah, product was here is to just throw you guys off. So product, we create a variable product that is what you get from minusing x and y. So x minus y is 12 minus 9. So product should now be 3. Okay, and now we call our callback, which is still display answer. So we go all the way back to display answer, console.log. Remember that we passed in 3 as our argument. So it should be answer colon space 3. And then it'll return, but we don't do anything with the return. So that's okay. So question 2 was missing the line where they call subtractor. Did it? Oh no. Okay, it seems that, Zoom is just trash. Saying we got it, we all got it. I'm sure that you guys would have been able to solve it if it wasn't for Zoom. Yeah, but so subtractor should be answer. So the first question, it should be answer 12, 12 with a colon. Second should be answer 12, answer 3 with a colon, right? Without all this, right? Also, I think I might have made a mistake with the sizing. Is this size okay with everyone? I think it would be easier to read if I made it a little bigger, but yeah, that was a mistake on my part. I think I should have made it a little bit bigger. But yeah, so this is the answers. It's okay if you don't get it. You'll, as I said, callbacks, and we'll be getting into later, promises. They're really like the very important aspects of asynchronous JavaScript. So you'll see it more and more, and as you see it more and more, you'll get more used to it. So it is okay. Who put Eugene is not cool for question 2? I just want to talk. Oh yeah. I wonder who did it. I wonder who. Let's continue. All right. So remember from our roadmap, we'll be going over what is promises, right? So in real life, promises are like the promises I make, that promises like my roommates make, but they never keep. Right, that's fine. So, but in JavaScript, what is a promise? So a promise in JavaScript is an object that is used to handle the asynchronous result of an operation. Okay, and it can be in one of 3 states: pending, fulfilled, reject. So just think of right now, promise is just something, or like a thing, an object, and it can be used to handle the asynchronous result of an operation. So it can, it's just a very, it's, in our perspective, it's a much cleaner way of calling, of doing callbacks. So I guess here's a visual representation. So you can think of this purple thing, this green thing, and this red thing all as the same promise. So say we created a promise, and this promise is called, it's the purple box. And so right now it doesn't tell us much. It just says, okay, it's just a promise. It's just a promise, and we will promise to, it's a promise, and because it's a promise, it is guaranteed to resolve. It is guaranteed to resolve. Yes, I'm using this term resolve. It's very important. So it would guarantee to become some value, or it guarantees to become some error. So this some value is our pending state, and then the some error is our, some value is our fulfilled state. This is our, the red, some error is our rejected state. So, it still seems kind of abstract, right? So let's try to get into an example. Like, okay, so this is the job hunt version, right? So say you apply to a job, okay? So they send you back something, the company in question will just go like, thank you for applying. Your application is under review and you can expect to hear back from us soon. And then, so this is our promise, right? The company gives you back a promise that they will send you a reply. And this is called our pending state. Yeah, too real. Like, I meant this as a joke, but as soon, like when I started writing this, I started to become very sad. Well, anyway, so this is our pending state. And after some time, it can resolve, right? What does it resolve into, right? So if it's a success, right? If it's a fulfilled, then it'll be like, they'll send something like, congratulations, you have been accepted. So our promise has become from our purple thing here, and it has like changed, it has transformed into this green thing here, right? Think of it as that. And of course, if we get rejected, it always starts with thank you for applying. Thank you for applying is always the phrase that you you're done, GG, well played. Anyways, so this is our rejected state. So we see this red box, that's a rejected state. And so you can think of like a promise as, it can either become this green state or it can either become this red state. Of course, in our README, we talked about more about how to create promises, but today in these slides, we'll be talking more about how to use them. So there's a lot of like nitty-gritty details about promises that we may not get into, but just keep in mind that promise is just a thing, an object that will either become some value that we want, or it will become an error value. And so moving on, right? So promises have a method called .then. Remember that promises are an object, and an object can have methods from our second workshop. So it has a .then method, right? So promises have a method called .then, and what is inside .then? So .then, it takes a function as an argument. So inside these brackets, you can put a function in it. And this function, and JavaScript will call this function whenever a promise has reached its fulfilled state. So let's assume that we have a promise called job app, right? So I won't talk much about how we created this job app promise or what happened before, but we just need to know that we can have job app is a promise, so we can chain the .then method on it. And remember that .then takes in a function as its parameter. So we can start calling this parameter, right? So we can call this. So let's start defining. What do we want to do, right? So remember that our promise, it returned and it became like the success message. So it became a promise. From a promise, it resolved into a message, a string. It resolved into congratulations, you have been accepted. So right now, this reply message stores the message, congratulations, you have been accepted. Just take it for now. And then, so what do we do inside this function? Well, we tell ourselves, yes, application successful. And then console.log, reply email was reply message, right? I came out to learn some asynchronous JavaScript, and I'm honestly feeling so personally attacked by this exam. No, honestly, I've yet to receive one of these, so it is okay. It is okay. We're all there with you. Does anyone have any questions about this? Like, this is what we'll be using later in our demo. So I would really like you guys, if you guys could understand like what is going on. I know my explanation could have been more clear, but because I couldn't get into like the nitty-gritty details, I think some of the things you have to take at face value. So does anyone understand where this reply message came from, for example? Yes, wait, how do we create a promise again? Yeah, I guess you're asking about where the hell did this job app variable come from? And unfortunately, we won't be getting into that today. If you're interested, you can read in the README, but because promises have something called like a resolve function or reject function that I don't want to get into today. So if you could run with me and just take it at face value that this job app is just a variable and this variable is a promise set. So reply message, is it an argument or is it a function? Yes, it is an argument. So our promise, if you remember here, looked something like this, right? So our promise is this thing inside the purple box, right? So a purple box is just a promise, and then and after some time, it became this green box here, and this message says, "Congratulations, you have been accepted." After a while, and this green box, this green box is our function, but inside this function, this contents inside this function, we can access this using this our argument reply message. So reply message contains the string "Congratulations, you have been accepted." So it is a variable and it is an argument. It is not a function. Good questions. Yes, exactly as Tim Gu said. Usually, you should never need to create promises yourself because a lot of libraries and browser APIs will generally provide promises for us. And what we need to learn here is how to use this promise. So using this .then is the most important thing and what I want you guys to understand. Right? Similarly, we can go to the .catch method. So so promises also have another method called .catch. Similarly, it takes a function as its argument, and JavaScript will call this function whenever a promise has reached its reject state. So let's see it in our example, right? So job app has, so remember before that we defined this .then function, very similar, takes reply message as its argument, and then we will console.log a bunch of stuff and there. However, remember that we can also use the .catch function. So what we'll do is we will chain it. We'll do a .catch after this, and like this is allowed. This is very common to see. Like you could see, it's very common to see a .then and then a .catch straight afterwards. So remember that .catch should be quite similar to .then, right? It takes in whatever value that our promise has resolved into, and then console.log, application failed, reply email was reply message, right? And note that in here, in .then, our reply message was congratulations, you have been accepted. But in the .catch, our reply message now has become, what was it again? Thank you for applying, although we thought blah, 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 right? So I would like the main point about this is that I want you guys to see the link between this diagram of how this purple box, if it becomes the green box, it will go to .then. However, if it goes to the red box, it will go to the .catch, right? So it looks very similar to Boolean or conditional, but the difference here again is that this is asynchronous JavaScript, so we'd like to do other things. So say that let me go back here and then we can get the full code. So say that we have a promise. We create a promise, and inside this promise, let's skip the next break slide that I see coming up. Good idea, right? So we created a promise, and and let's say that this promise, whatever this job app is doing, takes some time. So just like you apply to a company, the company takes like a long time to do deliberations, and So obviously, we don't want to just apply for this company and then wait until they reply. No, half your life is going to be gone. So we want to do other stuff. So Booleans don't allow us to do this, right? Booleans, Booleans just say, Booleans just do if something is happening and else. So, but then how do we wait for this? So like, let's say like, of course you can use a callback, right? You can use a callback and say that, if and then have your callback return a value, and then you can use a Boolean after your callback, a Boolean expression after your callback. That is completely fine, but promises is just a lot cleaner in doing the same thing. If you don't understand what I just said, that is completely fine. Just know that promises, this is how you use promises, and promises, like stuff like this is very common, and it makes your code a lot more cleaner than using a callback. Does every then need its catch? No. So technically not. So as we see in our demo later, sometimes we don't need catch and we can be lazy and not write it. But usually, always in coding, it's good practice to catch errors, whatever errors happen, and then deal with it. Otherwise, we don't want our website to just crash because we didn't write a catch, right? So break. Let's skip it, right? So we've learned all about asynchronous JavaScript previously. So just now, I introduced you to callbacks and promises. Well, promises and callbacks are part of what we call asynchronous programming, asynchronous JavaScript programming. And now what we'll be getting into is something called web APIs. So web APIs is all about how to, is actually an application of how we can use asynchronous programming to achieve this. So what is web API? So what is an API first? API stands for Application Programming Interface. That doesn't mean much. So we can just ignore this. Just want to get the definitions out of the way. And what we're essentially doing is we want to use code that other people have written, and we can do this by using their APIs. So let's say that someone else on the internet has written some code and we want to use it. How do we use this? That is web APIs, right? Yeah, plagiarism, but technically not because they consented. So let's use a car analogy as an example, right? So why do we use APIs? So if you're driving a car, you don't actually need to know how a car works to drive the car, right? You don't need to know how it works. All you need to know is how to use a steering wheel, how to use the shift stick, how to read the dashboard, and how to use the ignition key. You don't need to know about how the wheels are turned by the axle and the engine drives the axle or something, or what happens like when you turn the ignition key, how does it turn on the engine? What does it do? You don't need to know about all that. What you need to know is how to drive the car. And that's what an API is. So in a web API, we want to be able to use other people's code without needing to know how it works, right? We don't need to know about how you wrote your code. I just want to use it, right? And so a web API usually refers to a set of specific URLs that we can use to retrieve some data. It's okay if you don't really understand what this means. So a specific set of, you don't need to understand a specific set of URLs. You'll see what this means later. And basically, so a lot of people on the internet have written a lot of APIs, and we can use their code, but we want to be able to use it in a way that it's very easy for us to use it. We can just directly, there's like a very simple method for us to just call it, and we can get their data. So so I mentioned that we can go on the internet and see that many people have written many different APIs. Let's do it now. So I have some links down here in the speaker notes. Any API, public API, API list.fun, So, these are all APIs that people have written, right? And if you see here, there's so many different APIs. NBA.com has written their own API, so you can get, NBA statistics, right? we don't have our own NBA statistics. Let's use NBA statistics, right? And if you see here, Spotify has their own API, like Google has their own API. Have you guys, ordered food online, and then maybe it takes you to a map to like, okay, where do you want to pick up your food, right? They could be using a Google API, right? They could be using Google Maps API. And so why? Well, how do you use how does this map API work? Well, let's say that Postmates. I don't know if Postmates uses Google Maps API, but let's say Postmates wants to use Google Maps API because they're like, okay, why do we need to implement our own map when we can use Google's map? And of course, Google's like, sure, you can use our map, right? But we don't want you to know how our map is implemented. We don't want you to know the code behind our app. APIs provide a way for these two companies, these Postmates and Google, to communicate. So Postmates can go like, this is how we use your map, but I don't actually know what happens inside your map. I just know how to use it. And this is done through APIs, right? So, whenever you are going through, whenever you guys are doing your own Bloom projects or doing your own websites, you might want to use APIs. And so, these resources may provide helpful in searching. There's a lot of like different, there's APIs made by like big companies, but there's also APIs made by like very like individuals who just made it for fun. The API that we'll be using today is called cat facts. And it's just daily cat facts, very simple. So so whenever you guys will be doing your own projects, you'll probably come across a lot of this confusing like terminology. Some APIs require what we call like a key. Some may need you to pay. Like I think some like Google APIs may need you to pay, or like some may need you to create an account. How do we do all this? Well, we don't have enough time to unfortunately go over all of that. The best advice that we can give you is to read the docs. So as you can see here, there's a link called Go to API Docs. So I'm going to go to the API docs here, right? And cat facts, daily cat facts. So how do we use this, right? So we can see the description in these. Most documentation for APIs are quite comprehensive. What we want to do right now is to give you the tools you need to go to these API websites, go to these documentations on your own, and be able to understand the general gist of how to use it. That's our goal today. So we're going to be using cat facts as an example. So I see that cat facts has a lot of features. Cool. And then we see here API documentation. Start developing. Ooh, that sounds good. Let's go to start developing, right? So in this page, we see that there's a bunch of I'm sorry if you guys can't see this. Is this text too small? I'm going to zoom in. So we see a bunch of endpoints. And what do these endpoints mean? Well, unfortunately, we won't be able to get into all of that. Just know that there's a base URL, and I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go to new page, and you can paste this onto your web page. And then there's endpoints here, so there's like /facts /users. We see that this requires authentication, so let's try /facts. I just chained these two together. If you don't know how this works, it's okay. Just know that this is valid and you can do this. So let's press enter, and we see that it outputs so many different things, right? So actually, putting your link, whatever link they give you, into the Chrome browser suddenly outputs so many different things. Wow, that's pretty cool. Well, that's yeah. So for some reason our browser is able to output all of this. That's really cool. And wait, what is this in the first place? This is something called JSON objects, right? So right now this is something called JSON, and so we'll see here that okay, so we'll be getting into what JSON object is later. No worries. So we'll see here that when we do the /facts endpoint, we see that it gives a bunch of different facts. Every year, nearly 4 million cats are eaten in China as a delicacy. Is that true? No way. Okay, so America's cats, including house cats that adventure outdoors, are feral cats, killed between 1.3 billion and 4 billion, but that's a lot. Anyways, we don't want that many facts, so we find that when we do /random, we can specify only one fact. It's okay if you don't know how I got this. Just know that if you type this URL into the browser, you can get this, and that's how you use an API. That's when you're using your API, you ultimately probably want to get something like this. And so yeah, so let's go back to our slides. I did set this JSON format, and what is JSON? So so first of all, let's do a review on JavaScript objects, as we did in our second workshop. So here we have a JavaScript object called Eugene Fanboy. Its first name is Alex, his last name is Xia, totally not me. And its fan status, it has its fan status, and it has a function as a method, just like the .then method, this .fanboying method is the same. And well, it's not the same, but it's similar. So, and it just console.log this, right? The Uwu Eugene is my number one. Yay. And remember that we can access the methods and the attributes inside of the object. So we can do Eugene fanboy.firstname, Eugene fanboy.fanboying, and it will output these things, right? Just a quick refresher. JSON objects is different. So remember when we entered this link into our browser, it looked something like this. So this actually looks very confusing. This looks like, oh God, this is really ugly. What is this actually? So what I would like to do is go to something called JSON viewer. If you just search on Google JSON viewer, this is my personal preference. There's a lot of other ways to view this thingy here, this string of text, and you can go on JSON viewer. You can go to viewer, and you can see that, okay, so this is broken down everything for us. And it sort of looks a little like this, right? It looks a little like this. And well, turns out that this is called JSON, and JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. There's more about the differences between these JavaScript Object Notation and JavaScript Object in the README, but you just need to know that JSON is what web APIs give back to you. Web APIs give back JavaScript to you. And JavaScript, so web APIs give back JSON to you, and JavaScript cannot use this JSON as it is. It needs to use some special methods to convert this JSON back into JavaScript. And yeah, and we'll learn about this special methods later. So, this is a cute cat, cutest anime cat, but not as cute as Jamie's cats, no worries. So yeah, so is everybody good on this JSON thing? I'll stop for questions now. Okay, would you like me to go slower? Okay, can you assign JSON to an object you create? Yes, well, I'll give the answer yes, and we'll be doing this later. So how do we interpret a JSON file? Yes, so we'll be we interpret a JSON file by converting it into JavaScript objects. And if you look at these two things, JSON and JavaScript objects, they look so similar, right? It's just they have a key thing here and a value thing here. They look very similar, but they're slightly different, but there's a good, very easy way of converting it. And we'll see you later. So, now, so remember that, I'm gonna stay on this slide. So remember that when I talked to you about, okay, so we were able to enter this link, catfacts.heroku, into our browser, and we can get all this data. Well, how do we get JavaScript to use this data? How do we do this? How do we get a JavaScript code to get this thingy, this JSON object here? And so it turns out there's this JavaScript has an inbuilt function called fetch. And it is one of JavaScript's simplest methods to use web APIs. It takes one argument, the URL endpoint, and it will return a promise. So this is where our asynchronous JavaScript comes in handy. So I don't know if you guys have used XML HTTP requests from Ajax, but think of fetch as a newer and improved version. So well, don't worry if you don't know these terms, it's fine. So so let's see how to use fetch, right? So I'm gonna go back to my code here, and I'm going to create let's just use this callback.js file. It's nothing. All right. So empty file, and we want to use the fetch function, right? So fetch, and then remember how back then I told you that it has one argument, the URL endpoint. So you don't need to know what it's not important if you don't know what a URL endpoint actually means, but just need to know that in this case, it's referring to our, not this one. It's referring to our link here, our URL here that will return the JSON object. So we do this. Oh God, what happened? I guess the size. Okay. So if you see here, we have put this link and fetch. All we did was call fetch and put our URL inside of this fetch function. So remember I told you that this fetch function returns a promise. So we can create a variable myPromise1 equals to fetch. So myPromise1 is now our promise. And oh, I'm sorry, I forgot a semicolon. So remember that myPromise, every promise one, myPromise1 is a promise, and every promise has a .then method. As you can see, VS Code is very smart. They recommended this then function. So we can do a .then, right? If we do this .then, what do we do? Remember that .then is actually a function. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a function and do this, right? So if we recall, we can put an argument here. So I'm going to call this argument response. And this response is just going to be whatever our promise has resolved into. So in our job app example, this that promise resolved into a congratulations message. In this example, fetch will return a promise, and this promise can resolve into our JSON object. So right now, response, we can deal with response as if it was a JSON object. So, remember that we can't actually use this JSON object. We need to do something with it. Well, I'm going to do it now. So we can do return response.json. Okay. And so what is response.json? So in JavaScript, every JSON object has a method that we can call on it called .json. And what this .json does is it takes whatever this response is and it returns a promise, okay? And this promise, if it is fulfilled, will return and will resolve into a JavaScript object that we can use. So since response.json returns a promise, we can chain .then, and and since it promises to resolve into a JavaScript object, we can do res.json, where res.json is now our JavaScript object, and we can do whatever the hell we want with it. So console.log res.json. Yeah. So and of course, someone mentioned that do you always need .catch? You don't, right? And in this case, we don't really need a .catch, except, well, we don't really need it, but we should always do it. So I'm going to chain a .catch here, and error message, since it resolves into an error message, or we think so, and then we can console.log this error message. So in case an error happens, we'll most likely be able to know what this error message is. So does everyone understand what this is, what this code is doing? Yeah, we just did a whole lot of like new concepts. So it seems that we can chain two promises together. So what we did was we chained two thens. So there's two thens because fetch returns a promise, and then res.json, response.json returns another promise. So we have to use two .thens. And so this .catch refers to our second .then. Is error message a native variable or something? Or is it something you haven't defined? Right, so error message is a argument. So argument is called remember how in our job app, we have a, so response, so in our job application, our promise either resolved into a congratulations message, and it either resolved into a rejection message. And this error message is now a rejection message. We're just defining a parameter. So this is just a parameter name, and then we can use this parameter name. When we actually run the code, this error message will be replaced with whatever error message that fetch returns, or whatever error message that response that .json returns. Any other questions? It's okay. I'm gonna leave this up for some time so that you guys can really understand what is going on here. Yeah, so again, just going through this code. So what will this do? Let's just run it, right? We can run this. This is called callback.js, I believe. I believe this is on another one. So wait, sorry. I'm going to paste all this code and paste it into, oh wait, no. Yeah, no, this is fine. So we can go to our console, and then remember that our file is called callback.js. And if we run it, which it should work, we can see that it console.logs our JSON object. So this is a JSON object, and we can console.log it because we can use it. This is actually a variable. So this is now res.json. I think it's like a little weird because of the sizing. I'm gonna try and make it bigger. So you guys can see, yeah. So this is our promise. So this is our object. This is the thing returned in JavaScript object form. This is not JSON. So even though it may look like our JSON object, this has already been converted into a JavaScript object. And this is what I want you guys to understand, is that we can use, so this fetch returns a JSON, and all we did was convert this JSON into a JavaScript object, and then we can use a JavaScript object. Okay, so I'm gonna move on now. So it turns out that, since this variable returns my promise 1, we don't even need my promise 1. Since fetch returns its promise, we can just do fetch, and afterwards we can just chain .then, like so. And this is the exact same thing as what we did before, if we get rid of the semicolon. So this is exactly the same thing. All we did was just get rid of that variable and use it directly. It's sort of like how sometimes you do variable x equals 5 and variable y equals to x plus 2, but what we did instead was just do variable y equals to 5 plus 2 instead. It's sort of similar. We just chain these together, and these are the same. And what else can we do to shorten this? Well, it turns out that this response.json is pretty wordy, and it turns out in JavaScript that we can do something where we get rid of this curly braces, and we get rid of this response, and we put this all on the same line. It will look a little bit like this. And yeah, so this is called like a bracketless function notation. And well, this is something you can do. And all it does is it does the exact same thing as what we did before. It just, what is passed to those parameters? What do you mean, Sophia? Am I missing something? Okay, never mind. So, so yeah. So does everyone understand what I did to shorten this code? What are response and what is res.json? Right, so response is our JSON object and res.json is our JavaScript object. And all we did in this line is to just convert between the two. Is bracketless notation like having an if statement without brackets? I believe no. I don't think you can you? Oh, that's what you mean. Well, it is something similar to that, but just instead of, you can draw an analogy to that, but then at the end of the day, I want you to remember that whenever you see this, just know that it is the same thing as if we put brackets around this and put a return statement. It's exactly the same thing. We just did this, and this is seen very commonly. What does .json do again? Does it turn JSON into a JavaScript object? Yes, it turns JSON into a JavaScript object, and the way it does is that it returns a promise. Because why does it return a promise? Because this .json function doesn't know if you've actually given it a JSON object. So if for whatever reason you didn't give it a JSON object, and you've given it like some random variable, or it encountered an error when converting, it will resolve into a rejected. It will resolve into a rejected state. But if it resolves into when it has successfully converted, the promise will become a res.json. Yeah, it will become res.json, and it will become a JavaScript object, which is a JavaScript object. Yeah, and so by console.logging res.json, it means that this is successfully our JavaScript object. If we console.log response, we won't get anything useful from it because JavaScript can't actually use JSON. We need to use JavaScript object, and .json is how we convert from it. Right. Oh God, 742. I mean, not 1142. I'm sorry. Okay, so does everyone understand what we did? Right. So let's go back. Let's go back to our slides. Yeah. It's okay if you don't understand completely what we're doing here. So this is what we did just now, and it should look pretty familiar. It is okay if you don't understand completely what we did. Just know that this is pretty standard steps to convert between JSON objects to JavaScript objects, and this is how we use our fetch. And could you do fetch.json? No, you need .then, because .then is how. Oh, okay, I guess Eugene answered it. Okay, good. Yeah, promise doesn't have a JSON object. Promise needs to, you have to do it inside of a .then. Yeah, so good. So we can now, let's go over what we did again. So calling our fetch function will return a promise to resolve into a JSON object, and calling it .json on this JSON object. Remember that .json is a predefined JavaScript method that JavaScript just defines it for ourselves, and we can just use it. JavaScript object and this .json will return a promise to resolve into a JavaScript object. And now res.json is our JavaScript object, and we can do whatever we want with it, right? So let's have a demo, okay? So, I'm gonna do a demo now. We don't have much time, but I believe it is enough to do the demo. So if you see here, if you go to our README, there's some beginner code, right? There's some beginner code here. Sorry, there's some beginner code here that you can download the zip files here, or you can paste the code in demo starter. But if you don't want to follow along, you just want to kick back and not kick back, well, just absorb all the information. That is totally cool as well. And yeah, so if you want to follow along, I recommend downloading the zip file here. So I'm going to go ahead and download the zip file. Download. So it puts it in my download folder, demo starter.1. I'm going to go to my download folder, downloads folder. Oh no, you get to see all of my wonderful downloads. So I'm sorry if this is too small for you guys to see, but what I'm doing is I'm going to extract my demo. I'm going to extract it into my desktop. I'm going to extract it and put it here into my desktop. I'm going to extract. Yes, this worked. Okay. So if you see my desktop here right now, if you go to my desktop, you see we have 3 files. This is part of our demo. So I'm going to create another folder called demo Hackschool S5. And then I'm going to put these 3 files into my folder. And oh God, what happened? Yeah, so that is fine. That is, are you guys following? Okay, so now I'm going to open a new folder, and I'm going to open this demo Hackschool session 5 folder. And it opens the code for our demo, our starter code for our demo. So this is the starter code. And if you want the finished code, it is also in the README. So, let's do some review. So we can go ahead and open this. I'm going to open this file, and it looks a little like this. It looks a little like this, right? So I'm going to this, right? So we see two blocks here. So first block is click the button below to generate a cat fact. And don't worry about the challenge. The challenge is for, well, the challenge, and it's pretty self-explanatory here. If you want to try the challenge, you can go ahead and try and do it. I don't think we'll have time to go over the challenge today. So let's focus on our cat fact. So what we want to do, if we go to our index.html, is okay. Let's review of what the code does. This is a review from our DOM API workshop. So we have a div tag, and inside this div tag, it contains everything. So it contains everything that we want to care about. It has another div tag called click the button below to generate a cat fact, which corresponds to this paragraph. And then it has a button. It has a button, and it has an ID cat button. It has ID cat button and click for a cat fact. And then it has another div under this, but this div contains nothing. So here, so you see this little empty space under the button, that's our div. That's an empty div, and it has ID cat fact. So in our script.js, notice that we also included our script.js under here. In our script.js, we have what should be pretty familiar to you. We have query selectors. So don't worry about this part. These 3 lines. We need to worry about these 2 lines. So these 2 lines, we created a variable called cat fact, and we've selected it using the ID cat fact. And if you go back to our index HTML, you'll see that this ID refers to cat fact and to this div here. So right now we have selected this div. And then otherwise, and then if we go down, we have cat button, and we have selected it using the ID cat button. So this is our button here. So then, and then if you see down here, we have cat button dot add event listener. This should be pretty familiar. We've used add event listener before. It listens for a click event, and it will call this function get fact from API. Now, using our knowledge from today, we know that this function now, this get cat fact from API, is a callback function. And whenever we click this button, this function will be called. So what do we want this function to do? Well, obviously, well, not obviously, but what we want it to do is we want this function to display our cat fact onto our page. I'm going to see if there are any questions. Could you do none that seem to have answered? Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, get cat fact from API. It seems that we've done quite a good job before. We've in our slides here. we seem to have done a pretty good job. You know, we have fetch, we fetched our cat fact, and then we, at the end of the day, we seem to have gotten a variable called res.json, where that is now our JavaScript object. So let's go ahead and do the exact same thing. Okay, so we can call fetch. We call fetch using our URL, and you know, we want to get the cat fact, and you know, we happen to have exactly an API which lets us get a random cat fact. So if you reload this, you notice that these cat facts are completely different. Many people fear capturing a protozoan disease, toxoplasma. Okay, anyways, so you'll know that. Oops. So you'll know that. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy this link, and since you know, recall that fetch takes in a URL as an API, a URL as an argument. So and then we can directly then this, because it returns a promise. And very similar to what we did before, I'm just going to go over some reviews. So we have response, and then remember that we can directly do response.json, and this will return a promise to resolve into a JavaScript object. And since it is a promise, we can use .then. Every promise is a .then, and then inside .then, we need to define what we need to do after it has fulfilled. So remember that res.json is now our JavaScript object. And then we can do whatever we want with res.json now, since it's our JavaScript object. So we can console.log this and res.json. So this is what we got. This is what we got today. I mean, so far. This is what we got from our previous slide, and I forgot a semicolon. So let's just see what it does. You know. So I have. Let's open the console. I'm good. I believe it is. Yes. So we have a console here, and then, you know, console. So let's see what we do when we refresh our page. This is all good to you guys. So I have saved my file. So whenever if I refresh this page, this will be our new version. So I can refresh this page. Let's go to our console here, and let's see what happens if I click the button. If I click the button, it prints out this JavaScript object. Perfect. That is exactly what we want. And if you notice, just like any JavaScript object, we can access these things. So we can access created at, we can access source. And it seems that the thing we're most interested in is this text attribute. So this text, cats have free floating clavicle bones. Cool, cool. Anyways, so we can, it seems that we can access this by using console.log res.json. So let res.json.text, because that's how we access every attribute. So let's see what happens now. So I've saved this file now, and then I'm going to refresh it, and let's see what will be printed out. And I click for it. So, okay, so it seems to have printed out my object, same as before, and it also seems to have printed out this this text, which is exactly what we want, right? We want this text to be able to display to our website. And if you forgot from our DOM API, we don't want to just console.log this. We want to be able to display onto our website. So from our third workshop, we remember that, you know, cat fact has an attribute called inner HTML that we can use, and we can just set it to res.json.text, exactly what we did before. And just a reminder, cat fact is our variable that has a reference to this, that whatever we selected using a query selector. So in this case, it is this empty div here, cat fact. It is this empty div. All right. So let's try run this and let's see what happens. So if we refresh our page, I've saved this, and we refresh our page. Let's go to our console, completely empty console. I'm going to get rid of this so we can get more space. And then let's refresh this and see what happens. Refresh, and then we can click our button. I'm going to click. And look, oh, it prints out our cat fact here. Well, this is a very long cat fact. And, you know, we can click it again. I know, oh God, what is this? Anyways, yeah, that seemed to be some sort of error, or it may have been a joke. But yeah, so we can click it again and again for new facts and new facts. So there we go. That is our demo. Do we have any questions? And yeah, do you have any questions? I'm going to go back to our code here. I'm gonna give her more space for our code. Right, so all we did was we implemented this function. If you're still following along, is there anybody still following along that would like more time? One minute, please, no problem. If you have question, then please ask. So what we did here was we just did this almost exactly the same thing as our previous slides. So if you understand what we did here in this page, what we did was we ultimately used fetch, and we ended up with a JavaScript object of whatever was returned from our API. And then we analyzed that, this return JavaScript object has all of these attributes that we can access. And one of these happens to be text. And this text contains what we want to display. So we access our text using res.json.text. And then we set the inner HTML of our div tag as our res.json.text. Okay, so, in terms of DOM APIs, this is pretty standard. And we are done with our demo. And if you want some challenge, if you want to go home and do something for practice, there's an API called Numbers API. And if you go on Numbers API, you'll see that, this is their documentation. I'm going to make this bigger. This is their documentation, and they have an API reference. And the challenge is for you to read it, figure out what to do, and do the exact same thing as this. Do the exact same thing as what we did here, and input. We want to be able to input a number, 32. And then if you click for a number fact, it will display a fact about this number 32. That is a challenge. And if you're stuck, there are answers in the README. Anyways, I think was this useful to use a promise because we only go to the success then state? So it's not exactly useful or not useful, because no matter what we do, this fetch thingy will always return a promise. So we have to use promises no matter what. As for, and yeah, so, and I know we can define a .catch here. Catch, it's up to us, and then we can do like, error message. Console.log. Console.log error message. Very easy. Yeah, just as Eugene says, no matter what you do, you'll get errors, because what if this link, this guy, the guy who made this, suddenly decided to, oh no, I don't want to support this API anymore. Let me just get rid of this API, get rid of it. It's a waste of money. And then this fetch will return an error. And if I'm still my, disconnected programmer from the world, I don't know that this API has been taken down. I call this as normal. Then I would like some sort of error catching to be able to say that, okay, if this fetch returns an error, I want to be able to deal with it. I don't want my website to go boom. So, and like in this case, my website will not go boom because, the error will be caught at res.json. But let's say that, there's an error happening and it's a subtle error. It's not caught by many things. And then the moment we set catfact.inner HTML equals res.json.text, and then we do something to our page, and then we screwed up our page. That is not what we want, because of course you don't want to like put like random things onto your page and let your user know that you're a bad programmer. No. So you want the .catch to just console.log, or maybe like put like some sort of formal error handling so that the user will be like, oh, okay, so turns out that this happened. So a common thing to do is to do an alert, and but we won't go through this anymore. So I believe it is time, right? It is exactly 8, and we don't have any slides left. We're done with our demo, and what I would like to say is that, you know, if you want, these are the API links that I went to before, that when I was going over the APIs. You may find this useful whenever you guys are doing your own Bloom projects. And of course, there are other URLs that you can go. And you know, it's the best thing is to just go on the internet and search whatever you want. Like the other day, I was searching anime API, and then it gave me this API called jikan.moe. And it's just a my anime list API, which was what I thought was pretty cool. So, you know, you can do whatever you want. Just the internet's your limit, basically, and there's no limit to the internet. Just don't go on some dark, shady website that has an HTTP on it. Anyways, but just don't go to any shady links. And, you know, whenever you're making your own websites, as I said, all right, 3 tips: read the docs. If you're not unable to understand the docs, try to search on like Stack Overflow on GitHub to see, you know, some people have used them before, and you can use their code as reference, or you can go to us for help. Those are the biggest 3 tips that I can give to you guys when you guys are doing your own projects and you want to use APIs. But other than that, thanks for coming. Remember to fill out a feedback form. I'm sorry today we had some technical difficulties, and I know I went a little bit over time. It is 8:01, but please fill out our feedback form. We find it very useful, and we always take our feedback seriously. So come out next session for responsive design. It is also same time today. Thank you, Alex-san. Thank you. You're welcome. Anyways, yeah, and you're free to leave. If you have time, please have a look at the README. The README contains much more comprehensive information that I went over today, mainly because we didn't have time to do it. But yeah, if you would like to understand more, go to the README. There are also other links that you can read more about in the README. So if you have time, go to the README, go to the challenge. Otherwise, thank you for coming. Hey, any way that you guys could help me with a problem that I'm having with something I'm working on? If